How does a fan favorite become one? Step 1, have fun on the court any chance you get. Step 2, represent the underdog. Become one with the fan base. And the final step, do some ridiculous things on the basketball court. No matter what your description of a fan favorite is, Morris Peterson was the definition of it when he was in Toronto. Fans to this day still wear number 24 jerseys to Raptors games. His trick shots, his timely buckets, and his flair for the dramatic makes him an important part of Raptors history. But let's dive into one moment that made him forever a part of NBA history too, in this film. Mo Pete is a Michigan State legend. Entering the NBA, he was coming off an NCAA title with the Spartans, leading the team in scoring, and was voted the Big Ten Player of the Year. And he was drafted by the Raptors at the right time, 21st overall in 2000, with Vince Carter blossoming into a star and a crop of role players and veterans that would make up a feisty playoff team. Mo Pete stepped in and immediately played an important role as a rookie, playing over 22 minutes a night, becoming a marksman shooter for that era, defending at a high level, and finishing 4th in Rookie of the Year voting. Peterson was actually so good and effective that he became a starter towards the end of year 1 and even started in games 6 and 7 of their series against the Sixers to try and contain Aaron McKie. It became clear that Mo Pete was going to be a part of this core long term. And while things went haywire and the Vince Carter era didn't end up the way people would have hoped, it was actually Peterson who took on the mantle of being the fan favorite once Carter left. He was always smiling on the court, he paired really well as a defender and shooter next to their blossoming young star Chris Bosh, and he ultimately just always looked like he was having fun out there. In the mid-2000s, there were a crop of shooting guards that came into the league like Peterson, sort of the 3-and-D wing before that term became popular. He grew into a really effective player, and he even had a season where he averaged nearly 17 points a game and shot 40% from behind the arc on over 5 attempts a game. Elite for that era. He embraced the city as if he was born there and defended it like it. He would break out for performances on any given night, scoring 30 or getting hot and closing out a team. And he would make ridiculous trick shots.
Little hitch and go for Peterson. Throws it up and in. His back to the basket, a circus shot, and that brings smiles on the Toronto bench.
Count it. He was looking down at the paint floor and never even saw the shot.
Mo Pete had helped Raptors fans survive through a really tough era of basketball. He made games enjoyable. I can attest to that. I was too young to fully embrace the Vince Carter era, but Mo Pete, Jalen Rose, Jose Calderon, Charlie V, Chris Bosh, that was my childhood. And as a kid who didn't really care or understand contract extensions, I couldn't fathom the idea of Mo Pete not being on the Raptors. But still, this team was in a transition phase. They had just hired Brian Colangelo as GM and president. He had just drafted Andrea Bargnani number 1 overall in 2006 after an atrocious season for the Raptors. He flipped Charlie V, who finished 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting for TJ Ford, and he signed 2 international guys, Jorge Garbajosa and Anthony Parker, to fill out the rotation, all while extending Chris Bosh to a contract extension. But with those changes, it became apparent that the Raptors would not be keeping Peterson around, who was entering the final year of his contract in the 2006-07 season. As a result, Peterson's minutes drastically dropped from averaging nearly 40 minutes a night in 2006 to less than when he was a rookie. He was still effective in stints, but the organization was clearly shifting to something else. And for what it's worth, the 06-07 Raptors were actually good, the only real bright spot of an ugly era of hoops. Peterson didn't complain. He was even quoted by the Toronto Star later saying he just wanted to do what was best for the organization. He still played in 71 games and started in 11, but he wasn't part of the long-term plans for the Raptors, who had Juan Dixon playing well, Parker breaking out, Garbajosa taking up the rest of the wing minutes, and Bosh, who had turned into an all-star. By mid-March, the Raptors were firmly in a position to be a playoff team for the first time since 2002, but they were still battling for positioning. The mighty Detroit Pistons and LeBron James's Cavaliers had run away with the Eastern Conference. The gritty, defensive-minded Chicago Bulls were firmly in the driver's seat for the 3rd seed, with the crop of guys like Luol Deng, Kirk Heinrich, Ben Wallace, Andres Nocioni. Just wanted to give those guys a shout out. Also, one of my favorite teams of that era. Anyways, the 4th seed was going to come down to a race between the Raptors, Miami Heat, and Washington Wizards. And while you might think, who cares? There was a little more motivation for the Raptors in 2007. For starters, it meant taking home their first division banner, which back then meant a little more than it does now. Besides, the 4th seed would have given them home court advantage in the playoffs, and that was important for a team that went 30-11 on the season in Toronto and was below 500 on the road. So for the Raptors, battling for seeding, March basketball meant something. And they were set to face Gilbert Arenas and Anton Jamison's Wizards in DC on March 30th in an all-important game. Washington was just one game back of the Raptors for the 4 seed. If they won, they'd be tied, and there would be tiebreakers that I'm way too lazy to explain in this video. And the Raptors were a bit depleted. Their rookie, Bargnani, was sidelined recovering from emergency appendix surgery, and Garbajosa had just sustained a gruesome leg injury a few days before that ruled him out for the rest of the season. And so the stakes were high in this random regular season game. And the game started out as any 2006-2007 basketball game did. Random post-ups for big men. Seriously, one of the first possessions for the Wizards was a Brendan Haywood post-up, which the Raptors inexplicably double-teamed, and it led to a wide-open corner 3 for Arenas. And people want to go back to this era. Unfathomable. By halftime, the Raptors were looking good, leading by 3. Bosh was leading the way with 21 points, cooking Jamison any chance he got. But Arenas and Jamison kept the Wizards within striking distance, and in the 3rd quarter, things really flipped. Toronto went cold, or I should say Bosh did, as they double-teamed him when he got into the post. The Wizards took a 2-point lead heading into an all-important 4th quarter, and by the way, almost had their own buzzer beater.
Arenas at the buzzer, got it off the glass! Can you believe him? Looked like it had separation in his hand with 1/10 of a second on the clock.
In the 4th quarter, hey, that's Nuggets GM Calvin Booth. Anyways, Juan Dixon scored 8 points in the first 4 minutes of the quarter to help the Raptors retake the lead. Hibachi answered back with a few points himself to help the Wizards retake the lead. The game was back and forth from there. With 2 minutes left and the Wizards up 3, the Raptors had some good ball movement on this possession, and it led to a Parker 3. Tie game. A pair of Arenas free throws helped the Wizards retake the lead. Ford, who had a great game, drove against Arenas the other way and finished inside. Another tie game. Next possession down, Caron Butler gets fouled on a loose ball, but he misses both. A couple of possessions later, the Wizards finally do the right thing and give Arenas the ball. Shot clock winding down, he hits a tough shot to give them a 3-point lead, just peak Hibachi. After a timeout, the Raptors give the ball to Ford, who takes it all the way and scores. Next possession, they foul Deshaun Stevenson, who splits a pair of free throws, 2-point game. Raptors try the same thing. Ford goes right, and a guy who's been cooking all night misses the layup to tie it. At this point, 95% of 99% of NBA games are over. Caron Butler got fouled, hit both free throws, 4-point Wizards game. But wait, what's this? A perfectly executed out of timeout play by Sam Mitchell gets Juan Dixon a corner 3, back to a 1-point game. But you'll notice there's a familiar face on the court now. Yep, good old Mo Pete making his first appearance of the game in order to pose as a shooting threat. The Raptors and Wizards traded a pair of late game free throws. Mo Pete subbed on, then subbed off again. Situational 3-point shooting vibe. Now, Arenas went to the free throw line with 3.8 seconds left. Toronto was out of timeouts. It was a dire situation. He made both free throws, and in this moment, Peterson's trick shot wizardry culminated in one of the greatest buzzer beaters in NBA history. A moment that forever cemented Mo Pete, this role player with an affinity for making wild plays, as a fan favorite. A shot that helped his team force overtime, win the game, and eventually their first division banner. So welcome to a moment in Raptors history.
Now will the Wizards foul down the floor, and it's a deflection by Ruffin. And the play continues. Peterson got it! I don't believe it! I don't believe it! Onions, baby onions!
Thank you for watching that video. If you enjoyed that video, you could check out our other video essays. We break down tons of Raptors content throughout the season. And if you'd like, you can also subscribe and stay tuned for more stuff that we do. Thank you very much. Have a good day.